All right, let's get started like we normally do. Short period of bell meditation. Please get into a nice meditation posture wherever you are behind your avatar. Remember, focus on the sound of the bell. Get that deep listening going. Get that concentration and focus going so you can absorb some Dharma today. You're going to get distracted probably. It happens to all of us. When it does, remember, gently remind yourself and go back to focusing on the sound of the bell. Then there'll be that short pause, do the 3 recitations, and then on with the talk for today. So let me give you a moment, get into a nice meditation posture, and we'll begin at the sound of the bell. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher. I go for refuge to the Dharma, the teaching. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the taught. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I have taken refuge in the Buddha. I have taken refuge in the Dharma. I have taken refuge in the Sangha. 3 pure precepts. Cease to do harm. Do only good. Do good for others. Bodhisattva vow. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to lead them all. However inexhaustible my delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it completely. Swaha. So I mentioned on Monday that this was going to be about something called eel wriggling, and I said look it up if you could. And when I was going over it this morning, I thought, it's just not really right. So I switched it. This is about truth claims, or speaking truth or creating truth. This has a great connection to what's going on all around us right now, and I think you'll get it because you guys are pretty on it. So the ideal of appropriate speech, and this is what we're kind of talking about here, It arises in many forms within the reality of this experiential world that we inhabit. So there are unintentional untruths as well as intentional untruths. There are untruths that are offered with the intent to minimize disharmony and suffering, or to keep hold of power and wealth. So there are truths that are offered with the same intent, sometimes wholesome, sometimes unwholesome. And there are untruths offered as what the speaker wishes to be accepted as truth. Think about commercials, right? They repeat the commercial on TV over and over and over. That's kind of the idea. There are truths offered because they want to be accepted as truths, right? So you say them over and over again. And there is faith that is offered as truth, but then there's truth that's offered as faith. And no one can control the untruths or truths of another person. So, we must be mindful of our own choices of untruths and truths, and aware that what is heard could be an untruth or a truth. So we have to watch within, right? Watch inward, but we also need to watch outward, especially right now. So it is an individual responsibility of each of us to discern the difference for ourselves. Now, that doesn't preclude talking to someone else. Oh, what did you hear? Comparing what the information that you've gathered, because that's always a good thing to do. But in the end, it's your responsibility to decide basically what you're going to believe. Now, in Stephen Batchelor's book that he wrote, 10 years ago now or so, he wrote a book called Confessions of a Buddhist Atheist. And in there, he describes his own arising and falling away of a lie that he recounted to himself and others, and the effect that it had on his view of Buddhist philosophy and practice. Notice here, I said lie. Right? Before I said untruth. They're the same thing, right? Untruth is just a more gentle way of saying it, right? It's a less aggressive way of saying it. Where you say lie, people immediately shut down or try to, pop up that ego wall. Hello, Koan. So here's some excerpts from what he relates in the book, and this will give you an idea of what he's talking about. Quote, I was distracted from my thoughts about the plight of Tibet by the harsh shriek of what sounded like a trumpet. Perched on a ledge on the steep hillside beside the library, next to a smoking fire, stood a bespectacled lama, legs akimbo, blowing into a thigh bone and ringing a bell. When he wasn't blowing his horn, he would mutter what seemed like imprecations at the grumbling clouds above, his right hand extended in the threatening mudra, a ritual gesture used to ward off danger. From time to time, he would put down his thigh bone and fling an arc of mustard seeds against the ominous mists. Then there was an almighty crash, and rain hammered down on the corrugated iron roofs of the residential buildings on the far side of the library, obliterating the Dalai Lama's words. This noise went on for several minutes. The Lama on the hillside stamped his feet, blew his thigh bone, and rang his bell with increased urgency. The heavy drops of rain that had started falling on the dignitaries and the crowd abruptly stopped. After the Dalai Lama left and the crowd dispersed, I joined a small group of fellow monks, and in reverential tones we discussed how the Lama on the hill had prevented the storm from soaking us. I heard myself say, and you could hear the rain still falling all around us, over there by the library and on those government buildings as well. And the others nodded and smiled in awed agreement. Even as I was speaking, I knew I was not telling the truth. I had heard no rain on the roofs behind me, not a drop. Unquote. So here, Stephen Batchelor is talking about his personal experience with an outward untruth and an inward untruth, but also recognizing within himself that he grabbed that untruth and used it right? So that begs the question, why would a monk who took a vow not to lie say what he knew to be untrue? Well, he experienced a need for his untruth to be truth. This is one of those faith that is an untruth that I mentioned before. So it is the rising of an untruth that was meant to strengthen faith. And this gets done quite often. And we can just stretch it across all religions and belief systems. It happens. Now, in his next book that he wrote, he expanded on this phenomenon. This is in his book After Buddhism, and Stephen offers the term truth claim. So truth-claim. And it serves as a skillful way to describe an untruth that is spoken to strengthen someone's position. It is a type of speech that many people engage in to strengthen or create their own religions or their own social and political agendas. And again, look around. Man, we have a plethora of examples of this going on right now all over the world. It is a fact of human psychology that if you tell yourself the same story over and over, that it can become the truth in your mind. The same is a fact if someone like a politician or a fortune teller, a religious figure, or even a parent tells you the same thing repeatedly, it can seem like truth after a while, even if you know it's not. So it can become truth in your mind. And this is how truth claims arise and how they are eventually accepted as reality by some people. And I would be comfortable in saying, I think we've all, sometime in our birth to death so far, have heard a truth claim and accepted it as reality. Because it's what we wanted to believe, right? That becomes a kind of a habitual reactivity, if you will. Because you say, well, I'm not really sure it's true, but I accept it because it's easy. And it fits with what I want to believe, for example. Now, there's another book, you guys really into reading, I am here. There's another book called The Moor's Account. That's I'll just do this. Make it easy. This is a fiction book. And by the way, it's a very good book. It's called The Moor's Account by Layla Lalami. And in this book, there's a Moroccan slave character, and his name is Estebancio. And just to set the stage, this is when the Spanish were coming to Florida, and they were first, let's call it, invading Florida, and they were trying to bring the native peoples under their sway. And of course, they were looking for the Fountain of Youth and all that stuff. So anyway, this Moroccan slave named Estebancio, he experienced the words and actions of the Spanish Catholic priests that accompanied the soldiers there. And in the 16th century, what these priests were doing was they were holding ceremonies and claiming that all the Native Americans in Florida, of course they didn't call it Florida then, but you get the thing, in Florida were converted to Christianity because they said prayers over a deserted village, with the notion that it made all who lived there a Christian. There was nobody in the village. The natives had run. They had went and hid from these strangers that had showed up in their village. So picture the Catholic priests out there doing all their stuff and swinging their incense and doing all that and saying, okay, now everybody in this village has been converted to Christianity. And there's nobody in the village but them. So what Estebancio writes in his journal is that the priests were attempting to create a truth by what they said, rather than speaking the truth. So this is an example of truth claiming. You're claiming that what you're saying is a truth, and it really doesn't matter if it is or not. Now, let's jump to Buddhism here. In the Udana Sutta, the Buddha finds himself in the middle of a dispute concerning belief in rebirth. And there's a large group that consists of contemplatives and Brahmins and other religious wanderers that came from various sects that were wandering around India at that time. And they were all offering their different view, their different opinion, and their different beliefs. So it was just a big argue session going on. And the sutta describes their views. The cosmos is eternal, only this is true. Anything otherwise is worthless. Some of the contemplatives and Brahmins held this doctrine or this view. It might have been the cosmos is eternal, only this is true, anything otherwise is worthless. Or the cosmos is not eternal, or the cosmos is finite, or the cosmos is infinite, or the soul is the same thing as the body, or the soul is one thing and the body is another, or after death a Tathagata exists, or after death a Tathagata doesn't exist, or after a death the Tathagata both exists and does not exist. After a death, a Tathagata neither exists or does not exist. Only this is true, anything otherwise is worthless. And the arguments, they continued for quite a while, and eventually they degraded into each one announcing their own view. Right? Standing up and demanding, this is my view. The Dharma is like this, it's not like that. The Dharma is not like that, it's like this. We've all found ourselves doing this on subjects probably in our lives. So the Buddha's faced with all these people that are arguing their different views, and in his inimitable style, his skillful means, if you will, he offers up a parable. And this is a parable I'm sure you're going to recognize because it's the blind men and the elephant. So the king of Savatthi is faced with a similar situation. This has brought together a group of people blind from birth and had them see an elephant by touching it. And afterwards he came to them and asked if they had seen the elephant, to which they answered, yeah, I saw it. So the king asked each of them to describe it. And so the blind that had been shown the elephant's head said, the elephant, your majesty, is just like a jar. And those who had been shown the elephant's ear said, the elephant, your majesty, is just like a winnowing basket. And those who had been shown the elephant's tusk said, the elephant, your majesty, it's just like a plowshare. And those who had been shown the elephant's trunk said, your majesty, the elephant is just like the pole of a plow. And those who had been shown the elephant's body said, the elephant, your majesty, is just like a granary. And those who had been shown the elephant's foot said, the elephant, your majesty, is just like a post. And those who had been shown the elephant's hindquarters said, the elephant, your majesty, is just like a mortar. And those who had been shown the elephant's tail said, the elephant, your majesty, is just like a pestle. And those who had been shown the tuft at the end of the elephant's tail said, the elephant, your majesty, is just like a broom. And each was saying, the elephant is like this, it's not like that. The elephant's not like that, it's like this. And they begin to strike at one another with their fists. And a little fight ensues over an elephant. So the idea here is each person that had touched the elephant was defending their own truth claim. Right? They only had a small bit of the entire information, right? The entire elephant, if you will, but they each had a truth claim. They each knew what they were seeing. And this very thing happens between Buddhist traditions and practitioners. We're not immune to this. A moral of the parable of the blind and the elephant is that the Dharma must not be viewed as a set of truth claims, because this will only lead to conflict between those voicing their own opposite truth claims. Letting go of attachment to truth claims allows the knowledge to arise that Dharma practice is not about being right or wrong. It is about doing what is right in a given situation. Basing behavior and belief on metaphysical truth claims, and these would be things we can't prove through our own experience. This is not what the Buddha envisioned. He offered us tasks that we could engage in and compassionate principles and values so as practitioners we can use them as guides so that each situation that we find ourselves in can be viewed as unique, and then we can respond to it appropriately. In all instances, a practitioner must ask a question. What is the wisest and most compassionate thing I can do right now? Or, in the language of engaged Dharma, or the way I would put it, is what will promote human flourishing on the most encompassing scale? Basically, how much good can be done for the most people. But there's another important aspect to an effect of Stephen Batchelor's Tibetan experience. It became a causal factor that contributed to his atheist view of Buddhism, a complete discounting of metaphysical and deific doctrine across the Buddhist traditions. The Buddha set aside metaphysical as, I don't know, or it hasn't been proven to me, as those theories were not deemed valuable to a moment-to-moment Buddhist practice. The Buddha wanted our focus on what was going on, what was happening, right there, in that moment. So the Buddha did not deny the existence of these metaphysical things. He only said their value, they had little value or no value without proof through our own experience. So if somebody's throwing a truth claim at you, your best bet is find out if it's true. Experience it, look it up, do some research, talk to some folks. Or if they're telling you, oh, if you turn a glass upside down, the water won't pour out. Well, put some water in a glass and turn it upside down and see if they're right. But I have to say, I disagree with Stephen accepting an agnostic idea, basically be open to accept proof, over an atheistic view in all aspects of Buddhist history and philosophy. Agnosticism isn't appropriate when considering the deific doctrine that's accepted by some Buddhist traditions, because the Buddha made it clear that he was no deity, that he was only a human being. And he proclaimed in the moments before his death, and this is from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, quote, "It may be, Ananda, that to some among you the thought will come, ended is the word of the master. We have a master no longer. But it should not, Ananda, be so considered. For that which I have proclaimed and made known as the Dhamma and the discipline, that shall be your master when I am gone." So elevating the Buddha to some sort of deific status, even if it's Buddhas of the past and even Buddhas of the future, that's kind of a truth claim. Because the Buddha made it pretty clear before he died that he was not the one to be worshipped or followed. He wanted folks to follow the Dhamma and the discipline. And he added the discipline, by the way, for the monks, because again, he was speaking to monks. And he was talking about the Vinaya Pitaka and the discipline therein. But the Buddha was both pragmatic and non-dogmatic. He offered us the Four Ennobling Truths as the truths of human suffering, its cause, and that a way out of suffering existed, and that it's eightfold. And he didn't just say it's eightfold, he gave us the eightfold path as a guide. And on occasion, I jumped ahead here. His teachings he offered as having value on the path to the alleviation of suffering, and that's a value that must be experienced. Right? We can't just say, oh, we believe it, we have to experience it. And he offered the Dharma as a reality that each of us must strive to experience beyond our perceptions, beyond our preferences, beyond our habits and dispositions, or our habitual reactivities. And there he knew from his own experience that each of us could experience awakened moments in the pursuit of our own lives from birth to death. So he realized we don't need that figurehead, even though we do look to the Buddha, right? He is the human component of Buddhism. But we don't look to him to help us on the path. We look to the teachings that he offered and the teachings that came after them to guide us on the path. So the EDIG Sangha here at the Buddhist Center in Second Life, we are a non-denominational group, Sangha, if you will. And when I say non-denominational, I don't just mean, anybody from any Buddhist tradition can come and sit and talk and learn and discuss with us. No, we welcome Muslim, Jewish, Baha'i, Christians of all types. This is truly a non-denominational place to come and learn and experience. So it's a Sangha that's open to and attended by Buddhists of a mix of traditions and also a mix of non-Buddhists. And on occasion, someone will voice a truth claim that they read in a book or maybe they heard from another teacher. And some are trying to assert what they believe to be truth, while others are offering a truth more to ask if there is truth to what they know. And a few are attempting to actively defend what they hope is truth. Now, I will say right here, this doesn't happen very often anymore. We've become a pretty tight Sangha where we don't have to try to force our truth on someone else, but we can certainly bring it up and say, this is what I've experienced, or this has been how I've been on the path, or this are things that have happened to me. And so we discuss them and talk about them. But there really are no truth claims made like, no, I know this is true, or I want you to believe it. So in all instances, they hear that if their truth works for them in pursuit of positive personal character and human flourishing, then they should hold on to that reality. And if not, then they must look to the Dharma and their own experience so that a more appropriate reality can arise, or a more appropriate truth, if you will. As Buddhists, we look to change our own worldview. We look to change ourselves. And then we go out and be examples to others, and that's our truth claim. Right? That's our truth. We're not out there to evangelize and try to force that truth on someone else. We just, if somebody asks, we can say, well, I tried it, it works for me. Maybe it worked for you, but you got to try first. So let's step away from this now and let's a little short thing about what's going on in the world and how this applies. Though I pretty much think you figured it out already. There is so much truth claiming going on right now in the midst of this health emergency, this coronavirus pandemic. All kinds of truth claims coming out. Which medicines work, which don't. Does quarantining work? Does it not? Is China telling us the truth about how many people lived and died in China from the coronavirus? There's just all of these truth claims coming out. They're inundating us. They can produce a lot of anxiety. So if you're in doubt of something, research it, look around, ask questions. Don't just accept things as truth if you feel that they're not truth. Because the only way we're going to get through this period of emergency that we're going to be in for a while is if we start finding out what the reality is, right? The truth, the reality of what works and what doesn't. Right now, we can be pretty assured that physical distancing is a truth. We can accept that because in our experience, we've already seen it working, even to just a small degree, and a small degree is better than nothing, right? So, as your homework, as you go through the next week, I want you to think about truth claims. When you hear things coming up or you have experiences with others and their claims, I want you to keep in mind this idea of truth claims that are coming to you from outside. But I also want you to be equally mindful of your own propensity to offer truth claims. It'll be a very good practice.